The wine glass sits untouched on the mahogany table while empires change hands. Not through dramatic announcements or public ceremonies, but through conversations that never happened, agreements that were never spoken, understandings that exist only in the space between words. This is how real power moves, not like thunder that announces its presence, but like gravity that shapes everything while remaining invisible. They gather in rooms where no cameras are allowed, where no recordings are made, where no minutes are taken. These meetings do not appear on any calendar, are not mentioned in any report, leave no trace in any database. Yet the decisions made in these rooms determine the fate of nations, the direction of markets, the future of millions who will never know their names. The most profound changes begin not with grand gestures but with subtle shifts, a change in tone during a phone call, a meaningful glance across a crowded room, a pause that lasts just a moment too long. Those who understand this language of nuance hold the keys to kingdoms that exist nowhere on any map, yet exercise authority over territories that span the globe. Power at this level operates through absence as much as presence. What is not said often matters more than what is said. What is not done often has greater impact than what is done. What is not there often shapes events more decisively than what is there. The master of power learns to work with these negative spaces, to exercise influence through strategic withdrawal, to command through calculated silence. They call it the architecture of inevitability, the careful construction of circumstances where desired outcomes become the only logical conclusion. Not through force or coercion, but through the patient arrangement of conditions where alternatives gradually disappear, where resistance becomes pointless, where cooperation becomes the obvious choice. This architecture requires understanding systems at levels most people never perceive. Every organization, every community, every society operates according to hidden patterns that determine how decisions flow, how influence spreads, how change occurs. These patterns are invisible to casual observation but crystal clear to those who have learned to see them. The patterns reveal themselves through small details that most people ignore. Who speaks first in meetings, who sits where, who gets consulted before decisions are announced, who has access to information before it becomes public. These seemingly trivial elements of organizational life actually map the true structure of power, showing where real authority resides regardless of official hierarchies. Understanding these patterns allows for interventions that seem magical to those who cannot see the underlying mechanics. A suggestion whispered at the right moment can alter the course of a major decision. A strategic absence from a crucial meeting can shift the balance of influence. A carefully timed revelation can transform the entire landscape of possibility, but such interventions require perfect timing, and perfect timing requires deep understanding of how events unfold, how people think, how systems respond to pressure. This understanding comes not from studying theory but from years of careful observation, patient experimentation, and painful learning from mistakes that cannot be undone. The mistakes are inevitable because the systems are too complex for perfect prediction, the people too variable for complete control, the circumstances too fluid for absolute certainty. The skilled practitioner of power accepts this uncertainty while working to minimize it, plans for multiple scenarios while hoping for the best, prepares for failure while striving for success. This acceptance of uncertainty paradoxically becomes a source of strength because it prevents the rigidity that destroys so many who achieve significant influence. The person who insists on controlling everything controls nothing. The person who demands certainty operates in a world of constant disappointment. The person who requires guarantees never takes the risks necessary for great achievement. true power flows to those who can function effectively in ambiguous situations, who can make critical decisions with incomplete information, who can maintain clear direction while adapting to changing circumstances. They develop comfort with discomfort, confidence despite uncertainty, clarity in the midst of confusion. This psychological resilience becomes a magnet for others who lack it. In a world where most people are overwhelmed by complexity, paralyzed by uncertainty, and defeated by ambiguity, those who can navigate these challenges naturally attract followers, partners, and allies. People gravitate towards strength that can provide stability in unstable times, but this gravitational effect creates its own challenges because attraction must be managed carefully. Too much visibility invites opposition. Too many followers create management problems. Too much responsibility limits flexibility. The powerful person must learn to attract selectively, to inspire discriminately, to lead without becoming trapped by their own leadership. This selective attraction requires understanding what different people need and providing just enough to maintain their allegiance without creating dependency. Each relationship must be calibrated precisely, enough value to justify continued association, enough distance to preserve independence, enough mystery to maintain interest. The calibration is an art that develops through experience because every person responds differently to the same stimuli. What motivates one person repels another. What inspires loyalty in some creates resentment in others. What generates enthusiasm here produces indifference there. The successful power player develops a repertoire of approaches, a portfolio of techniques, a collection of strategies that can be deployed as circumstances require. This adaptability extends beyond individual relationships to entire cultures and contexts. What works in one industry fails in another. What succeeds in one country backfires in another. What proves effective in one era becomes obsolete in another. Power must constantly evolve its methods while preserving its essential principles. The principles themselves are few but fundamental. The first is that all power ultimately derives from the ability to create value for others. People align themselves with those who can improve their situation, solve their problems, or advance their interests. Without this value creation, all other techniques become manipulation that eventually generates resistance. The second principle is that power flows through networks, not hierarchies. Official organizational charts show authority, but real influence moves through relationships that cross all formal boundaries. Understanding these networks, gaining access to them, and learning to influence them determines effectiveness far more than official position. The third principle is that timing determines outcome more than effort. The right action at the right moment achieves more than massive effort applied at the wrong time. Power concentrates on reading the timing, recognizing the moments, and being prepared to act when opportunity appears. The fourth principle is that perception shapes reality more than facts. What people believe to be true affects their behavior more than what is actually true. Power works with these perceptions, influences these beliefs, and shapes these interpretations of reality. The fifth principle is that systems have their own logic that transcends individual intentions. Even the most powerful person cannot completely control complex systems, only influence their direction by understanding their internal dynamics and working with their natural tendencies rather than against them. These principles provide the foundation for action, but action itself requires courage that most people never develop. The courage to make decisions that affect others without their consent. The courage to act on incomplete information when delay means failure. The courage to take responsibility for outcomes that cannot be predicted or controlled. This courage is not recklessness or ignorance of consequences. It is calculated acceptance of risk based on careful analysis of probabilities, thorough preparation for contingencies, and clear understanding of what is at stake. The powerful person acts not because they are certain of success but because they understand that inaction guarantees failure. The preparation for action is often more important than the action itself. Every significant move requires months or years of groundwork, relationships cultivated, resources assembled, contingencies planned, opposition neutralized. By the time action becomes visible, the outcome has usually already been determined by the quality of preparation. This preparation takes place largely in shadow because visible preparation alerts opposition, creates resistance, and invites interference. The skilled practitioner of power works quietly, moves subtly, builds systematically without attracting attention until the moment for revelation arrives. The moment of revelation is when all preparation crystallizes into action, when all planning becomes reality, when all influence converts into outcome. This moment cannot be forced or rushed, it can only be recognized and seized when it appears. Missing the moment means wasting all the preparation that led to it. But seizing the moment successfully requires not just recognizing it but having the capabilities necessary to exploit it. These capabilities must be developed long before they are needed because they cannot be acquired quickly when opportunity presents itself. Power is always preparing for moments that may never come while remaining ready to act when they do. The development of these capabilities is a lifetime pursuit that never ends because the requirements keep evolving. What was sufficient yesterday becomes inadequate today. What works today will fail tomorrow. What seems permanent proves temporary. Power must constantly upgrade itself to remain relevant in a changing world. This constant evolution requires learning that goes beyond formal education or professional training. It demands understanding gleaned from every interaction, wisdom extracted from every experience, insight drawn from every success and failure. The powerful person becomes a perpetual student of human nature, organizational dynamics, and systemic change. The study is both fascinating and exhausting because it never stops. Every conversation provides data about human behavior. Every negotiation reveals patterns of decision-making. Every conflict exposes vulnerabilities and strengths. Every collaboration demonstrates the mechanics of cooperation and competition. This continuous analysis shapes how the powerful person sees everything, not just as events occurring but as information to be processed, patterns to be recognized, opportunities to be evaluated. They cannot turn off this analytical perspective even in personal relationships, even in private moments, even in attempts at relaxation. The isolation that results from this constant analysis is one of the hidden costs of power. Relationships become harder to maintain when every interaction is also a learning opportunity, when every person is also a subject of study, when every situation is also a strategic consideration. Spontaneity becomes rare when everything must be evaluated for its implications, yet this isolation is also protection because it prevents the emotional entanglements that can compromise judgment, limit options, or create vulnerabilities. The powerful person learns to find satisfaction in achievement rather than affection, in results rather than relationships, in legacy rather than popularity. This shift in the source of satisfaction is necessary because power at the highest levels requires decisions that cannot be popular, actions that cannot be understood, sacrifices that cannot be appreciated. The person who needs approval from others cannot make choices that serve larger purposes when those purposes conflict with immediate preferences. The larger purposes that guide the use of power become more important as capabilities increase. With greater ability to influence outcomes comes greater responsibility for ensuring those outcomes serve worthy ends. Power without purpose becomes arbitrary and ultimately self-destructive. But purpose itself must evolve as understanding deepens and circumstances change. What seemed like noble goals at one level of power may prove inadequate or misguided at higher levels. The purpose that motivated the acquisition of power may need to be transformed by the wisdom that comes with exercising it. This evolution of purpose represents the highest development of power, when it transcends personal ambition to serve something larger than the individual who wields it. At this level, power becomes stewardship rather than possession, responsibility rather than privilege, service rather than advantage. The transition to this higher understanding marks the difference between temporary influence and lasting legacy. Those who use power only for personal gain find that their influence dies with them. Those who use power to build something enduring create changes that continue long after they are gone. This legacy orientation changes everything about how power is exercised. Every decision must be evaluated not just for its immediate effects but for its long-term consequences. Every action must be considered not just for its personal benefits but for its impact on others. Every choice must be weighed not just for its present value but for its contribution to future possibilities. The complexity of this multidimensional thinking challenges the limits of human capability. It requires holding numerous variables in mind simultaneously, predicting consequences across multiple time horizons, balancing competing interests and values, and making choices that optimize across all these dimensions. Few people can sustain this level of mental complexity for extended periods. Most retreat to simpler frameworks, easier decisions, more limited perspectives. This retreat is understandable, but it also explains why so few achieve and maintain power at the highest levels. Those who can sustain this complexity, who can think systemically while acting practically, who can maintain perspective while making decisions, find themselves operating in a realm where few others can function effectively. This creates opportunities but also responsibilities that cannot be shared or delegated. The ultimate responsibility is choosing how to use capabilities that can shape the future of human civilization. This choice cannot be made once and forgotten. It must be made continuously as new challenges arise, new opportunities appear, new threats emerge. The weight of this responsibility transforms those who bear it, usually in ways they never anticipated. The person who sought power for personal reasons discovers that personal reasons become inadequate to justify the effort required to maintain it. The person who acquired power to solve specific problems finds that success creates new problems requiring different solutions. This transformation is irreversible because once someone understands the true nature of power, they cannot return to the simpler worldview they held before. Once they experience the ability to influence events at this scale, they cannot be satisfied with lesser impacts. Once they accept responsibility for outcomes at this level, they cannot abandon that responsibility without abandoning part of themselves. The mechanics of transformation operate through daily choices that seem insignificant individually but accumulate into fundamental changes in character. Each decision to prioritize long-term consequences over short-term benefits strengthens the capacity for strategic thinking. Each choice to serve others' interests alongside one's own develops the ability to see beyond personal concerns. Each commitment to truth over convenience builds the integrity necessary for lasting influence. These accumulated choices reshape not just behavior but identity. The person gradually becomes someone who thinks differently, feels differently, responds differently to the same stimuli that once provoked different reactions. The transformation is so gradual that they may not notice it occurring, yet so profound that others notice the change long before they recognize it themselves. The recognition of this transformation often comes as a shock because it represents the loss of the person they once were. The ambitions that once motivated them may seem petty. The concerns that once consumed them may appear trivial. The relationships that once satisfied them may feel insufficient. This loss is real and must be grieved even as the new self emerges, but with this loss comes gains that could not have been imagined from the earlier perspective. The ability to see patterns that were previously invisible. The capacity to influence outcomes that once seemed unchangeable. The opportunity to create meaning at a scale that transcends individual existence. These gains compensate for the losses, but they also create new forms of isolation because fewer people can relate to someone operating at this level. The experiences become harder to share, the perspectives more difficult to communicate, the challenges increasingly unique to those who face them. This isolation intensifies as power increases because each level brings new requirements, new standards, new forms of accountability. What was acceptable at lower levels becomes inadequate at higher ones. What was sufficient for past challenges proves insufficient for present ones. What worked in previous circumstances fails in current ones. The constant need to evolve, to grow, to adapt prevents the comfort of settled routines or established patterns. The powerful person lives in a state of perpetual development, always becoming rather than simply being, always reaching for higher levels of capability and understanding. This perpetual development is both exhausting and exhilarating. Exhausting because it never allows for complete rest or total satisfaction. Exhilarating because it offers unlimited potential for growth and impact. The choice to embrace this way of life determines whether power becomes a burden or an opportunity. Those who choose to embrace it discover resources within themselves they never knew existed. Capabilities that seemed impossible become natural. Challenges that seemed insurmountable become routine. Outcomes that seemed magical become predictable applications of understood principles, but these discoveries require facing fears that most people spend their lives avoiding. The fear of being responsible for others' welfare. The fear of making decisions without certainty. The fear of being judged by standards that apply to no one else. The fear of living without the safety nets that protect ordinary people from the consequences of their choices. Facing these fears transforms them from obstacles into assets. Responsibility becomes purpose. Uncertainty becomes opportunity. Judgment becomes feedback. Consequences become education. The transformation of relationship to these fundamental aspects of existence enables functioning at levels that would be impossible while still fearing them. The choice to enter this realm is therefore not just a choice about what to do but a choice about who to become. It is not just a decision about external circumstances but a commitment to internal transformation. It is not just a strategy for achieving goals but a path that changes the person walking it. Understanding this transformative nature of power helps explain why so few choose to pursue it seriously and why even fewer succeed in wielding it responsibly. The price is higher than most people are willing or able to pay. The demands exceed what most people can sustain. The isolation is more complete than most people can bear, but for those who can pay the price, sustain the demands, and bear the isolation, power offers the ultimate opportunity, the chance to matter in ways that transcend individual existence, to create change that outlasts personal mortality, to contribute something meaningful to the ongoing human story. This opportunity comes with no guarantees, no assurances, no certainties. Success is not promised to those who seek power any more than wisdom is guaranteed to those who acquire it. But the possibility exists for those brave enough to pursue it, disciplined enough to develop it, and wise enough to use it well. The path remains open to those who understand its requirements and accept its costs. The choice belongs to each individual, to seek power or avoid it, to develop it or waste it, to use it for selfish ends or noble purposes. In the end, power simply amplifies what already exists within the person who wields it. It makes good people more capable of good and bad people more capable of harm. It reveals character rather than creating it, exposes values rather than generating them, amplifies existing tendencies rather than transforming them. The real question is not whether power is good or evil, but whether those who seek it are worthy of it. The answer to that question determines not just what they accomplish, but what they become in the process of accomplishing it.